Jeeves and Wooster Omnibus number 1. Thank you, Jeeves. Chapter 1. Jeeves gives notice. I was a shade perturbed. Nothing to signify, really, but still just a spot concerned. As I sat in the old flat, idly touching the strings of my banjolele, an instrument to which I had become greatly addicted of late, and you couldn't have said that the brow was actually furrowed, and yet, on the other hand, you couldn't have stated absolutely that it wasn't. Perhaps the word pensive about covers it. It seemed to me that a situation fraught with embarrassing potentialities had arisen. "Jeeves," I said, "do you know what?" "No, sir." "Do you know whom I saw last night?" "No, sir." "J. Washburn Stoker and his daughter, Pauline." "Indeed, sir." "They must be over here." "It would seem so, sir." "Well, awkward, what?" "I can concede that after what occurred in New York it might be distressing for you to encounter Miss Stoker, sir, but I fancy the contingency need scarcely arise." I weighed this. When you start talking about contingencies arising, Jeeves, the brain seems to flicker and I rather miss the gist. Do you mean that I ought to be able to keep out of her way? "Yes, sir." "Avoid her?" "Yes, sir." I played 5 bars of Old Man River with something of abandon. His pronouncement had eased my mind. I followed his reasoning. After all, London's a large place. Quite simple not to run into people if you don't want to. Gave me rather a shock, though. "I can readily imagine so, sir." "Accentuated by the fact that they were accompanied by Sir Roderick Glossop." "Indeed, sir." "Yes, it was at the Savoy Grill. They were putting on the nosebag together at the table by the window. And here's rather a rummy thing, Jeeves. The 4th member of the party was Lord Chufnell's aunt, Myrtle. Now what would she be doing in that gang?" "Possibly her ladyship is in acquaintance either with Mr. Stoker, Miss Stoker, or Sir Roderick, sir." "Yes, that may be so." "Yes, that might account for it. But it surprised me, I confess." "Did you enter into conversation with them, sir?" "Who, me? No, Jeeves, I was out of the room like a streak. Apart from wishing to dodge the Stokers, can you see me wantonly and deliberately going and chatting with old Glossop?" "Certainly he has never proved a very congenial companion in the past, sir." "If there is one man in the world I hope never to exchange speech with again, it is that old crumb." "I forgot to mention, sir, Sir Roderick called you to see you this morning." "What?" "Yes, sir." "He called to see me?" "Yes, sir." "After what has passed between us?" "Yes, sir." "Well, I'm dashed." "Yes, sir, I informed him that you had not yet risen, and he said that he would return later." "He did he?" I laughed. One of those sardonic ones. "Well, when he does, set the dog on him." "We have no dog, sir." "Well, step down to the flat and borrow Miss Tinkermork's Pomeranian, paying social calls after the way he behaved in New York. I never heard of such a thing. Did you ever hear of such a thing, Jeeves?" "I confess that in the circumstances his advent occasioned me surprise, sir." "I should think it did. Good Lord. Good heavens, good gosh. The man must have a crust of a rhinoceros." And when I have given you the inside story, I think you will agree with me that my heat was justified. Let me marshal my facts and go to it. About 3 months before, noting a certain liveliness in my Aunt Agatha, I had deemed it prudent to pop across to New York for a space to give her time to blow over. And about halfway through my first week there, in the course of a beano of some description at the Sherry Neverland, I made the acquaintance of Pauline Stoker. She got right in amongst me. Her beauty maddened me like wine. "Jeeves," I recollect saying, on returning to the apartment, "who's the fellow who on looking at something felt like somebody looking at something? I learned the passage at school, but it has escaped me." "I fancy the individual you have in mind, sir, is the poet Keats, who compared his emotion on first reading Chapman's Homer to those of stout Cortez, when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific." "The Pacific, eh?" "Yes, sir. And all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien." "Of course, it all comes back to me. Well, that's how I felt this afternoon on being introduced to Miss Pauline Stoker. Press the trousers with special care tonight, Jeeves. I am dining with her. In New York, I've always found, one get off a mark quickly in matters of heart. This, I believe, is due to something in the air. 2 weeks later I proposed to Pauline. She accepted me. So far, so good. But mark the sequel. Scarcely 48 hours after that, a monkey wrench was bunged into the machinery, and the whole thing was off. The hand that flung that monkey wrench was the hand of Sir Roderick Glossop. In these memoirs of mine, as you may recall, I have had occasion to make somewhat frequent mention of his old pot of poison. A bold-domed, bushy-browed blighter, ostensibly a nerve specialist, but in reality, as everybody knows, nothing more nor less than a high-priced loony doctor. He's been crop-hip in my path for years, always with the most momentous results. And it so happened that he was in New York when the announcement of my engagement appeared in the papers. What brought him there was one of his periodical visits to J. Washburn Stoker's second cousin George. This George was a man who, after a lifetime of doing down the widow and the orphan, had begun to feel the strain a bit. His conversation was odd, and he had a tendency to walk on his hands. He had been a patient of Sir Roderick's for some years, and it was the latter's practice to dash over to New York every once in a while to take a look at him. He arrived on the present occasion just in time to read over the morning coffee and egg the news that Bertram Wooster and Pauline Stoker were planning to do the wedding glide. And as far as I can ascertain, he was at the telephone, ringing up the father of the bride-to-be, without so much as stopping to wipe his mouth. Well, what he told J. Washburn about me I cannot of course say, but at a venture, I imagine, he informed him that I had once been engaged to his daughter, Honoria, and that he had broken off the match because he had decided that I was barman to the core. He would have touched, no doubt, on the incident of the cats and the fish in my bedroom. Possibly, also, on the episode of the stolen hat and my habit of climbing down water-spouts, winding up, it may be, of a description of the unfortunate affair of a punctured hot water bottle at Lady Wickham's. A close friend of J. Washburn's, and a man on whose judgment J. W. relied, I take it that he had little difficulty in persuading the latter that I was not the ideal son-in-law. At any rate, as I say, within a mere 48 hours of the holy moment, I was notified that it would be necessary for me to order the new sponge-bag trousers and gardeniere, because my nomination had been cancelled. And it was this man who was having the cool what's-the-word to come call at the Wooster home. I mean, I ask you. I resolved to be pretty terse with him. I was still playing the banjolele when he arrived. Those who know Bertram Wooster best are aware that he is a man of sudden, strong enthusiasms, and that, when in the grip of one of these, he becomes a remorseless machine, tense, absorbed, single-minded. It was so in the matter of this banjolele playing of mine. Since the night at the Alhambra, when the supreme virtuosity of Ben Bloom and his 16 Baltimore buddies had fired me up to take up the study of the instrument, not a day had passed without its couple hours' assiduous practice. And I was twanging the strings like one inspired, when the door opened and Jeeves shovelled in the foul, strait-waistcoat specialist to whom I have just been alluding. In the interval which had elapsed since I had first been apprised of a man's desire to have speech with me, I had been thinking things over, and the only conclusion to which I could come was that he must have had a change of heart of some nature, and decided that an apology was due to me for the way he had behaved. It was, therefore, a somewhat softened Bertram Wooster, who now rose to do the honours. "Ah, Sir Roderick," I said, "good morning." Nothing could have exceeded the courtesy with which I had spoken. Conceive of my astonishment, therefore, when his only reply was a grunt, and an indubitably unpleasant grunt at that. I felt that my diagnosis of the situation had been wrong. Right off the balls I had been. Here was no square-shooting apologiser. He couldn't have been glaring at me with more obvious distaste if I had been the germ of dementia praecox. Well, if that was the attitude he was proposing to adopt, well, I mean to say. My geniality waned. I drew myself up coldly at the same time, raising a stiff eyebrow, and I was just about to work off the old "to what am I indebted for this visit" gag, when he chipped in ahead of me. You ought to be certified. I beg your pardon? You're a public nuisance. For weeks it appears you've been making life a hell for all your neighbours with some hideous musical instrument. I see you have it with you now. How dare you play that thing in a respectable block of flats? Infernal din! I remained cool and dignified. Did you say infernal din? I did. Oh? Well, let me tell you that the man that hath no music in himself... I stepped to the door. Jeeves, I called down the passage, what was it Shakespeare said the man who hadn't music in himself was fit for? Treasons, stratagems, and spoils, sir. Thank you, Jeeves. Is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils, I said, returning. He danced a step or two. Are you aware that the occupant of the flat below, Mrs. Tinkermulk, is one of my patients? A woman in a highly nervous condition? I had to give her a sedative. I raised a hand. Spare the gossip from the loony bin, I said distantly. Might I inquire on my side if you are aware that Miss Tinkermulk owns a Pomeranian? Oh, don't drivel. I am not drivelling. This animal yaps all day, and not infrequently far into the night. So, Mrs. Tinkermulk has the nerve to complain of my banjolele, has she? Ha! Let her first pluck out the pom which is in her own eye, I said, becoming a bit scriptural. He chafed visibly. I'm not here to talk about dogs. I wish for your assurance that you will immediately cease annoying this unfortunate woman. I shook my head. I'm sorry she is a cold audience, but my art must come first. That is your final word, is it? It is. Very good. You will hear more of this. And Miss Tinkermulk will hear more of this, I replied, brandishing the banjolele. I touched the buzzer. Jeeves, I said, show Sir our Glossop out. I confess that I was pleased with the manner in which I had comported myself during the clash of wills. There was a time, you must remember, when the sudden appearance of old Glossop in my sitting-room would have been enough to send me bolting for cover like a rabbit. But since then I had passed through the furnace, and the sight of him no longer filled me with a nameless dread. With a good deal of quiet self-satisfaction, I proceeded to play The Wedding of a Painted Doll, Singing in the Rain, Three Little Words, Good Night, Sweetheart, My Love Parade, Spring is Here, Whose Baby Are You, and part of I Want an Automobile with a Horn That Goes to Toot, in the order named. And it was as I was approaching the end of this last number that the telephone rang. I went to the instrument and stood listening, and as I listened my face grew hard and set. Very good, Mr. Mangelhofer, I said coldly. You may inform Mrs. Tinkermulk and her associates that I choose the latter alternative. I touched the bell. Jeeves, I said, there's been a spot of trouble. Indeed, sir. Unpleasantness is rearing its ugly head in Berkeley Mansions, W1. I note also a lack of give and take, and an absence of a neighbourly spirit. I've just been talking to the manager of this building on the telephone, and he has delivered an ultimatum. He says I must either chuck playing the banjolele or clear out. Indeed, sir. Complaints, it would seem, have been lodged by the Honourable Mrs. Tinkermulk of C6, by Lieutenant Colonel J.J. Bustard, DSO of B5, and Sir Everard and Lady Blennerhassett of B7. All right? So be it. I don't care. We shall be well rid of these Tinkermulks, these Bustards, and these Blennerhassetts. I leave them without a pang. You are proposing to move, sir? I raised the eyebrows. Surely, Jeeves, you cannot imagine that I would even consider any other course. But I fear you will encounter a similar hostility elsewhere, sir. Not where I am going. It is my intention to retire to the depths of the country. In some old-world sequestered nook I shall find a cottage, and there resume my studies. A cottage, sir? A cottage, Jeeves. If possible, honeysuckle-covered. The next moment you could have knocked me down with a toothpick. There was a brief pause, and then Jeeves, whom I have nurtured in my bosom, so to speak, for years and years and years, gave a sort of cough, and there proceeded from his lips these incredible words. "In that case, I fear I must give my notice." There was a tense silence. I stared at the man. "Jeeves," I said, and you wouldn't be far out in describing me as stunned. "Did I hear you correctly?" "Yes, sir." "You actually contemplate leaving my entourage?" "Only with the greatest reluctance, sir, but if it is your intention to play that instrument within the narrow confines of a country cottage..." I drew myself up. "You say that instrument, Jeeves, and you say it in an unpleasant, soupy voice. Am I to understand that you dislike this banjolele?" "Yes, sir." "You've studied all right up till now?" "With grave difficulty, sir." "And let me tell you that better men than you have stood worse than banjoleles. Are you aware that a certain Bulgarian, Eloya Gospodinov, once played the bagpipes for 24 hours without a stop? Ripley vouches for this in his Believe It or Not." "Indeed, sir." "Well, do you suppose Gospodinov's personal attendant kicked? A laughable idea. They are made of better stuff than that in Bulgaria. I am convinced that he was behind the young master from start to finish of his attempt on the Central European record, and I have no doubt frequently rallied round with ice packs and other restoratives. Be Bulgarian, Jeeves." "No, sir. I fear I cannot recede from my position." "But dash it, you say you are receding from your position." "I should have said I cannot abandon the stand which I have taken." "Oh," I mused a while. "You mean this, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." "You have thought it all out carefully, weighing the pros and cons, balancing this against that?" "Yes, sir." "And you are resolved?" "Yes, sir. If it is really your intention to continue playing that instrument, I have no option but to leave." The Worcester blood boiled over. Circumstances of recent years have so shaped themselves as to place this blighter in a position which you might describe as that of a domestic Mussolini. But forgetting this and simply sticking to cold fact, what is Jeeves, after all? A valet, a salaried attendant, and a fellow simply can't go on truckling. Do I mean truckling? I know it begins with a T. To his valet forever. There comes a moment when he must remember that his ancestors did dashed well at the Battle of Crecy and put the old foot down. This moment had now arrived. Then leave, dash it! "Very good, sir."